We are live. Just want to confirm this is working because there's a few things that I feel compelled to get off of my chest. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? All right, here we go. So, I don't know how many of you saw the interview I did earlier tonight. I interviewed Marla. She had wrote a book on unschooling, and I was really torn about doing this, but my conscience just wouldn't let me remain silent. Because when someone fundamentally attacks your worldview, and not just your worldview, put a worldview out into the ether that can be a danger to your own children, you have no choice but to step up. And as I've made my transition from being political to focusing on teaching homeschooling, it's been a conundrum for me because I really haven't wanted to get into the weeds and do political stuff. But, I had come across Marla on Instagram, and she sent me her book, and I was kind enough to read it, and I invited her onto my stream, and I wanted to have a really good conversation with an experienced unschooler, because I know a lot of people that get into homeschooling, they're very curious about unschooling and what it is, and for someone who has years and years experience, I think it is very valuable to have them tell their story. But in the middle of our conversation, in which I was keeping politics out of it, time after time she went into rants about white people. And time after time she talked about how bad white people were. Now, the first time she did it, I thought, no big deal, I'm going to let it go because people have their own views, and we weren't there to talk about politics. We were there to educate people on unschooling. Something, by the way, if you haven't watched it, the video is very valuable if you are looking into homeschooling and unschooling. Marta had a lot to add in that respect. So she started talking about how bad white people were, and I just politely redirected the conversation through questioning back to the topic of homeschooling and unschooling. And then time and time again, she continued to go into rants about how bad white people were. And at the time, I decided not to attack. Then I got off of the stream, and I sat back and I started to think about the stream. And for any of you that have followed me for some time, well, you can imagine it really started to bother me. And it really started to eat at my conscience, because I'm a person that when I see something's wrong, I have to say something. I can't control myself. It's how I got into FFR News. It's how I became the person you see here today. It's why I go against the grain. It's why I am homeschooling my child and advocate for homeschooling at classicallearner.com. I teach homeschooling. And I just can't sit back and say nothing because it just really started to just grind at me. So time and time again, Marla started to talk about how bad white people were and what white people had done to the world. And the first thing I thought was, my child is white. My child hasn't done anything to the world. And by you putting that rhetoric out into the world, you are endangering his future, and that is not something I can allow to stand. Now, we can look into it deeper. We could talk about what Marla is doing when she is pushing that narrative to her children, telling her children that they're bad inherently because they're white. Because anyone with a semblance of logic knows that her children, just by being born a skin color, never did anything to anyone. But we could even look a little deeper into it. We could talk about history. She wants to talk about how bad white people are. Well, let's talk about my family. My family, my great grandmother came to the United States of America from Russia in 1899. Slavery was outlawed in the United States of America in 1865. She was Russian, by the way, and she hid that fact because, well, being a Russian American during the Cold War, not exactly being welcomed with open arms. The rest of my family, Italians, arrived in the United States of America in the early 1900s. They all arrived from Calabria, Italy, the rest of my family. So I'm Italian and Russian again, and they came to New York in the north. So again, the Civil War, which wasn't fought over slavery, I'm sure based on her rhetoric that she thinks that, although it's just, if you think that, you just have no idea about history. Sorry, I was just pissed off about the whole situation. I couldn't hold my tongue. So my grandparents came to the United States of America, to New York from Italy, in the first quarter of the 20th century. So again, they had nothing to do with slavery and historical oppression of black people in the United States of America. Now, I did find it very interesting because she kept talking about, how she had moved her family to Cambodia and she wanted to get out and see the world and talk to people and understand their situation. And that's great. I think that's great that she got out into the world and she's talking to people and understanding their situation. But then she proceeded to talk to Donald Trump supporters, who many of my people are, and describe them as a caricature that has been put out by the media. So the lack of self-awareness in that situation, not knowing that you're describing a group of people, you're describing people, Trump supporters, in a way that in no way is indicative of the way Trump supporters actually are, well, I just thought it was kind of ironic. She talked about how Trump supporters were so hateful of Muslims, which is just a ridiculous assertion. Many Trump supporters are willing to acknowledge that there has been Islamic terrorism. Is anyone denying that? But also many Trump supporters are the first ones to point out the terrible situation that Muslims are put in through these NGOs, which human traffickers convince them to leave their country and go to the West. And when they get to the West, they're unable to get a job because they have no skill set. They don't have the skill set needed for the service jobs in the United States of America and Europe, whatever it might be. And then they're forced into these ghettos. And they don't speak the language and they're forced into these ghettos. So many Trump supporters point that out. But there were so many assumptions. And the assumption that Trump supporters are motivated by racism is such a laughable caricature put on by the media that I just couldn't allow it to slide, as I did during the interview, again, because I was looking to have a nice conversation about unschooling and homeschooling, which, by the way, we did. So if you didn't watch it, check it out. But it was something that really bothered me to the point where, I mean, I never do anything like this, for those of you that follow me, but I felt compelled at 12:40 in the morning to do this video to clarify that it is in no way okay. And quite frankly, Marla, I thought it was very racist for you to keep commenting on how bad white people are, even to equate Christianity with the plight of Somalians, which for anyone that digs deep and follows what goes on in the world, Christians are the most persecuted group of people in the entire world. It is not even close. In fact, Christians with pretty much open arms invite Muslims into the Western world, which I've stated time and time again. I hold my position is a mistake. I don't think we should have any immigration into the United States of America, not because of Muslims bad, but because American jobs have been outsourced and a giant welfare state is sucking the American people dry and leaving them in great debt. Christians, on the other hand, are not always welcome around the world, and if you look up the statistic, churches are burned down every day, but the media doesn't report on it. Because if Marla were to um, open her eyes, she would see that she is perpetuating the very racism, the very injustice that she talks about. Because there's no doubt there has been historical injustices, but if you want to talk about what's going on in the world, if you want to talk about the world over the course of the last, in my lifetime, well, the left will say racism or you can only be a racist if you have institutional power. Well, if you put on the mainstream media, you would see the caricature that Marla described during our interview, that people that support Donald Trump are just racist and they want the borders closed because they just hate brown people, which is a ridiculous assertion. That's what the media wants you to believe, because the institutional power is not for white skin or black skin, Marla. That's a ridiculous assertion. The institutional power is focused on growing the size of the government. So the institutional power, the mainstream media, will do anything it can to grow the size of the government. And to do that, it wants to bring in people from the third world. So many of the people, statistically, that oppose that, because they're the ones being sucked dry by the welfare state, Donald Trump supporters say, no, we need to close the borders because the welfare state and taxation is sucking me dry. And oh, by the way, yes, if you have open borders, illegal immigration, you're going to have a lot of the drug cartels coming into the country, which has to do with the opium crisis and people dying every day. So there's going to be a lot of crime with that. So the media is going to demonize, in the lowest common denominator, just say, oh, more racism. The media is going to demonize Trump supporters and say, oh, no, they're bad. They're against open borders because they're just racist bigots. Racist, bigot, homophobe. Everything Marla described in our interview was a caricature of what Trump supporters are portrayed as being by the media. So she talked a lot about diversity and spending time with different people. I think maybe she's been in Cambodia too long. Maybe you should spend more time with, I don't know, Trump supporters and find out who they actually are, because it was absolutely insulting, and she was the one who came off as a racist. In fact, it was ridiculous in a conversation about homeschooling and unschooling how she just kept talking about how bad white people are. Sorry, Marla, I have a white son. I won't allow that rhetoric to go out into the world because it's absolutely bullshit. Because my white son didn't do anything to anyone. Oh, and by the way, you want to talk about diversity? I grew up in a very diverse town, and my best friends growing up, their names were Brenton and Malik and Donovan, and I'm still friends with them to this day. So no, your caricature of what Donald Trump supporters is absolutely ridiculous. I didn't want to have to do this, and I held my tongue during the interview because I kept telling myself, I'm here to talk about homeschooling, I'm here to talk about unschooling, which, by the way, the interview was phenomenal. But Marla kept bringing it back to how bad white people are, and I just couldn't allow that to stand. Because what I saw as a person that has eaten up what institutional power has told her is true, what institutional power has been used against white people, which, by the way, I don't even like this kind of rhetoric because it's low consciousness. Notice I'm not attacking Muslims. I'm attacking Marla. I'm just defending what white people actually are. Because if she had an actual understanding of how the powers that be operate, the institutional power, like the mainstream media, like the education system, which I push so greatly against, she would know that the system gains its power by dividing people into camps. So what the system does is it says all white people are bad, they have oppressed you, so you should hate white people, creating hatred against white people. And by the way, they mischaracterize what happens historically. So you want to talk about the topic of the Civil War. They'll say, oh, well, the Civil War was thought because those bad, dirty Southerners, well, they just wanted to keep slavery afloat. They just wanted to have their slaves. In reality, 99% of Southerners didn't have slaves and hated the sick 1% of elite landowners who made their lives living hell as well. The Southerners seceded from the North over economic differences. Mainly, it had to do with the North wanting tariffs and the South not wanting those tariffs because it made it almost impossible for the South to sell their crops. So they were losing their jobs, but the North didn't care because they were trying to protect the North was trying to protect their northern industry, their city industry. You know, the whole Industrial Revolution, that type of thing. And that's what the Civil War was fought over. But history is written by the victors, so now it's been rewritten for the purpose of divide and conquer to say that, oh no, what happened is evil white people were trying to fight to enslave black people, which is the furthest thing from the truth if you understand history. And then you want to talk about civil rights and the Jim Crow laws and how that's blamed on white people, when in reality, white people spent their time fighting against that. In fact, Christian white people are the first group of people in the history of the world. It started in England and then it made its way to the United States because there had been slavery throughout all human history. The first people in the history of the world to fight for and successfully outlaw slavery. And then they didn't just outlaw it in the United States and England, but actually fought to have slavery outlawed throughout the rest of the world. And it's only places like Somalia, like Libya, where slavery actually still exists. And it's not white people doing the slavery. And again, that's not an attack on minorities, because I believe, again, as I'll get to, that the way the power structure operates is to divide people into camps so that they can divide and conquer, and then the white people and the black people and the Muslims and the Jews. And so when I say, oh my God, you don't attack the Muslims, you don't have to talk to the Muslims. Yes, I also acknowledge truths. There are Muslims that are suicide bombers, that are jihadis. There are Jewish people that are in control of the media, that have large influence over the academic system, that are in control of Hollywood, that absolutely subvert our society. But again, I don't like to divide people into camps. I'm not a binary thinker, so I don't blame all Jewish people for that. I don't blame all Muslims for that. Just like I wouldn't blame all white people for something that happened that 1% of people did 150 years ago. That's racist and absurd, Marler. You are the one that's a racist. Stop going around saying white people are terrible when you're the one. You are a caricature of your own beliefs and you don't even see it. Where was I? Jim Crow laws. So then the Jim Crow laws were put into place, and white people, actually the racist Republicans, if you want to get into it, were the ones that fought against those Jim Crow laws. And Jim Crow was a government program. Government is elitist. The same people that control the media, the same people that control academia. Then you want to talk about the education system and institutional power. Because Marla had brought up how white people are told that they're better than everyone by the education system and that they didn't do anything wrong, when in reality it's the exact opposite. The education system pushes the lies I just discussed about the Civil War. The education system says that the Civil War was about white people wanting slavery, when in reality, the only reason the Northerners continued to fight the war, you know, the Emancipation Proclamation? Well, the Northerners said, hey, wait a second, why do we care if the Southerners secede? Let them be their own country. And then when Lincoln gave the Emancipation Proclamation and said, oh, well, you know, we will, if we win the Civil War, outlaw slavery from those 1% of people that had it, Northern white men risked their lives and died and had their limbs cut off for the cause of ending slavery. The exact opposite of what the school system teaches, which is white people are just so bad. I tried to let it go, but I couldn't help myself. I got the interview ended, and I got angry. I haven't talked about politics in a while, and I wasn't letting anything draw me back in, but this will draw me back in, because I can't allow someone to come on my stream and be so disrespectful, not to only me, but I'm sure she did some background research on what FFR News is and the things I've talked about in the past. So not only me, but be disrespectful to the people that follow me, because she knows a lot of those people are Christians. She knows a lot of those people are Trump supporters. And to act like there's some caricature that she saw on the news of institutional power being used against white people, just like it is in Hollywood, right? Because you don't see a lot of movies talking about how great white people are historically. No, what you see movies about is Django Unchained, that white people are these evil slave owners. Let me give you a hint. All of the Southerners in the South, they hated the character that DiCaprio played in Django Unchained. And if you don't know that, you just don't understand history. But institutional power, Hollywood, is used against white people. Institutional power, the mainstream media, which every day creates the caricature in your mind of what Trump supporters are, is used against white people. And the academic system, from a very young age, convinces white children that they're somehow bad because something that, even if it were true, happened 100, 150 years ago. No, if you think that, if you're blaming white people for that, Marla, you're the very racist you're telling everyone else they are. I didn't want to have to do this. I've been staying out of the political game. I didn't want to do it. But this is, I couldn't let it go. I held my tongue. I held my tongue during the interview. I was there to talk about homeschooling. I was there to talk about unschooling. But Marla just kept spewing her racist shit. She just kept saying white people are so bad. She's been to Cambodia and she has spoken with the Somalians about how bad white people are. Because of the color of her skin. That's the type of rhetoric that will lead to my children being killed one day because of the color of their skin. So I can't allow that to stand. So I didn't want to have to do this. It's 12:58 at night. It really pissed me off. And I had to come on here because I can't let that stand. So, back to what I was talking about. So, because Marla, I want you to understand. I don't want to just bash you, if you can get through this. So the way the elites operate is they divide people into camps. So what you say is that white people, because they're the majority population, so you need everyone to be against the majority population. You say that white people are your historical oppressors, that they are behind slavery, even though that's not true, that the Jim Crow laws, that all the lies we see, everything we've seen with Rodney King and everything that it is, that white people are very bad. They're your oppressors. And then this way, and then you teach a false history, and you get a lot of people to have resentment against the majority population. Then you divide that population in half. So what you say is that there is a war being waged on women. You use statistics that are easily manipulated to say that women are being systematically oppressed in the United States of America, and you say that they make 70 cents on the dollar. Now, I could point to Harvard studies or any number of studies you look at, but if you look at the data, if you account for actually the amount of hours worked, not going on leave. Yes, it's capitalism. If you go on leave, that's not valuable to a business. And then what you find, the same having the same job, the same level of education. If you account for all of those things, there's no pay gap. Men and women make the same amount of money. Then what you do is you say that well, you know what, women are oppressed because these evil men don't want you to have abortions. And you say it's because they want to control your body. And you deflect the conversation from being what it's actually about. I mean, these people aren't even able to see that there's a third party involved. You're not telling a woman what she can do with her body. You're saying that under no circumstances in society is it permissible to murder another human being, right? You couldn't hit a 3-month-old with a hammer in the head. So what people who are pro-life are arguing for, which, by the way, if you're not pro-life, what are you? What they're saying is that if you abort a baby, you have murdered a human being, therefore murder should not be permitted. And they're saying, well, you see that they're just trying to take away women's rights. Women have all the rights that men have and more rights. In fact, if you look at divorce records, you'll see that women overwhelmingly win custody. And that women are overwhelmingly receive the child support. And women overwhelmingly receive monthly checks from men who are forced to pay by a court of law. And if they lose their job and don't make as much money, these men could find themselves in prison. You find that women have a much easier time getting college scholarships. That more women, by a large number, attend college than men. That more women that get college degrees than men. And that the only reason there's more men in the STEM fields is because more men choose to go into STEM. You're not going to have more women in STEM if they choose to go into medicine, by the way. We don't hear people complaining that there's more women in medicine, that there's more women in education than there are men. Why would you complain? Women choose to go into those fields. Men don't. Therefore, there's less men in those fields. So they use these topics to break people into camps. So you have the evil white people that are the oppressors. Then you have women, because you want to break that white group in half even more. You say women are also being oppressed, so really it's white men that are bad. So now you have camps. You have white men, you have who are the oppressors, you have all women who are oppressed, although white women are more oppressive than a woman of color. Then you use that narrative that white people are oppressors to convince black people that white people are the reason for their problems. And you use historical lies to justify that. So instead of being honest with minorities about what happened historically, and if you were being honest, what you would say is that slavery was a government program, and that the citizens of the United States of America risked their lives and gave their lives to fight against that government program and to end slavery. And that Jim Crow was a government program, and again, the citizens of the United States of America stood up against that government-enforced program and ended slavery. But then what happened was the government just did a 180, and instead of just creating equal rights, they created a situation where they try to create different laws for different groups of people. So you have affirmative action laws, and then you talk about white people being historical oppressors, and then what it does is it creates resentment between white people and black people. Then what the government does is they import cocaine and drugs from the third world. Look up Gary Webb and the real Rick Ross. And you flood not white people. What the government does is you flood drugs into the United States of America. But of course, there were more minorities in inner cities. And the result of that was what? More minorities in inner cities. So the result of that is more minorities end up on the drugs. And the government breaks up the black families. And then you get a lot of black families that don't have fathers because they're either arrested for the drugs that the government pumped in, or they wind up being in gangs, and it creates a really bad situation. And what we saw was in the 1950s, they're something ridiculously great, like 90% of black children were born into wedlock, where today only 30% of black children are born into two-parent homes. So then you get you get a lot of black people, and it's also white people, it's also Spanish people, but more statistically, you get more black people that are in single-parent homes, a single mother home. So the mother, she can't make enough money to support the family and watch the child. So what happens is she winds up going on government welfare. And then the way they structure the welfare program, they make it where there's no transition. So if she were to take a job, she would lose the welfare checks, and she would actually have less money to have a job. So it keeps people in a permanent state of modern slavery. And so then you get these camps, right? And then you get agitators like Al Sharpton, who are designed by the system to divide white people and black people, right? So now you have these camps. You have white people, you have women, you have black people. Then you create as many camps as you can. So then you say gay people, right? I mean, if they weren't trying to divide people into camps, right? If gay people were fighting for gay rights, I mean, gay people have gay rights. They're fighting for what rights? What rights don't gay people have? They didn't have marriage, and in 2015 they got marriage. So take this scenario. If you were actually trying to, if this wasn't all agitation, right? If you were leading the gay rights movement, right? When they had these gay right parades, I give you two scenarios. Scenario one, you have gay right parades as they are. People show up in thongs with their penises out, swinging them around, all types of sexually suggestive things, and they're doing this in the street in front of children. If this was women doing this, if this was a hetero rights parade, and men and women were acting this way, people would find it abhorrent. It would not be okay. But you say, oh, well, no, we're going to have these gay right parades, and we're going to have these people go swing their dinglings out in the street in front of children, and anyone who points out that that's not okay, we're going to call them homophobe. Because they're not fighting for any rights. Gay people have the same rights as everyone else in the United States of America. What are they fighting for? If they were actually fighting for rights, rather than be agitators, you would have them dressed up in suits. You would get all the gay people and all the people that support them, which are many, and they would dress up in suits, and they would hold signs about what they're fighting for, and they would do a serious marches about gay rights. But it's not about that. All of this stuff is pushed down from the top. You see, Marla? All of this stuff is pushed down from the top, from the system, from the Republicans and the Democrats, who are two sides of the same coin, by the way. If you don't see that, you don't understand how this works. It's a divide and conquer strategy. You see. You don't see how it works. So no, it's gay rights is about division. It's about putting people in camps. So you want the gay people. Just like Al Sharpton, the same scenario works, right? Just as many, more white people are shot by police than black people. Now, don't get me wrong. I'll be the first one to tell you, there are shootings of white people and black people. I've seen many shootings of black people that are unjustified. And the police officers are members of the government, and they should be prosecuted for those shootings. But what happens is, no matter what happens, whether the shooting was unjustified or whether the police officer's life was in danger, and the man had... Well, all right. It's not just the police officer's life being in danger that has to... In order for a shooting to be justified, a police officer shooting a citizen of the United States, in order for that to be justified, the citizen has to actually be breaking a law, and a serious law. You know, the citizen, Mike Brown, for example. I mean, he robbed a convenience store and he choked. He choked the clerk at the convenience store. And then the police officer approached him, and he, on video, attempted to grab the police officer's gun. And the police officer didn't shoot him right away, which means he showed great restraint. So, but what happens is the agitators come in, like Al Sharpton, and they just scream, you see, this is all about racism, no matter what the cause was. And then this is a divide and conquer strategy, you see, because then the white people that are watching say, no, that's ridiculous, this isn't about racism. And they use the emotions of the situation and the media, the institutional power, which they control, to get the minorities all riled up. And then what you have is two white people watching one script, black people watching another script, and you get people all at odds with each other. You see, this is all about racism. This is all about hatred. And oh, by the way, a lot of those people you see rioting, those aren't just crazed black people in the streets. No, that money funnels down from institutions like the Open Society Foundation, right? From institutions like the Open Society Foundation, who actually pays professional agitators to go to Ferguson, Missouri and burn the town down. And then the police officers and the police department don't do anything. They're told to stand down because the same George Soros, people of that ilk, also pay for the politicians that control the police departments. And all of this is done, again, you see, if it was actually about black rights, I could get behind that for sure. No doubt about it. Like I said, I've seen many shootings. I've seen tapes of black people that are shot by police officer, murder. I've seen them shot in the back, cold blood. I've also seen it with white people. And when a police officer murders someone, they should go to jail. But if you actually wanted to get justice, what you would do is you would put on your suits, peacefully go out, peacefully protest, march, hold up your signs, and you would demand thorough investigations into what actually happened. But that's not what happens, because the whole purpose is all of this, everything that you think, this caricature of what Trump supporters are, that's the image given to you by the very institutional power being used against white people in the examples you gave. Now, don't get me wrong, everything I'm explaining, you see, the institutional power is obviously used against white people. White people are the boogeyman. They're the devil, right? The media says white people are bad. Academia says white people are bad. Hollywood says white people are bad. But then the institutional power is used in the same way against the blacks. Like I said, they flood the inner cities with cocaine. By the way, that's against all citizens, but obviously there's more there's a high population of blacks in those areas. Same thing with the opioid crisis right now, by the way. Why do you think we've been in Afghanistan for so long, Marla? Why do you think we've been there? You think we're there by accident? No. Why didn't we burn down the poppy fields? Because the government, they fund their black operations by selling drugs in the United States of America. So the black people, institutional power is used against them. They're flooded with drugs. You have the Al Sharpton agitators, the media who gives a false report about what actually happened. For instance, CNBC, when Trayvon Martin, that whole situation played out, they actually cut up George Zimmerman's, the audio, the police call that he made. The dispatcher said, what is the ethnicity of the assailant? And George Zimmerman said, black. What NBC did was they cut out that question. So they just showed Zimmerman go on a rant, and then he went on his rant, and then he's black. You see? So that was institutional power being used not just against white people, but also against black people. So you put the black people in camps, you put the white people in camps, you put the women in camps, you put the gay people in camps. Then you push ridiculous agendas. So then you roll out this big transgender agenda, right? Because it's just another opportunity to divide people. So you start with the transgender stuff, and what you do is you say that, there's these people, they identify, maybe they're born a male and they identify as a woman, and no one really has a problem with it, adults do. It's not how these caricature Trump supporters, they don't care what adults do. So what you do is you say, oh, well, you know what? No, now we're going to let anyone use the girls' bathroom. So then you get the pushback, right? So that's natural. You're going to get pushback of people who are saying, wait a second, you can't just let anyone into the girls' room because that's going to lead to rapes and stuff of that nature. But then you say, no, anyone opposing that is hateful of transgender. And so you get the people that follow a certain media narrative and they say, yeah, well, if you oppose this, you're hateful of the transgenders, and you create more divide, you create more victims. And then you start to push it even further, and you start to put 5-10-year-olds on television that have had sex change assignments. And people say, wait a second, can we slow down? This is child abuse. And you say, no, anyone that says this is child abuse is hateful. And you get the people that fall on the other side of the spectrum who say, oh, no, it's just their choice. This is a ridiculous assertion, but the point is it's about dividing, and you divide people into even more camps. Then what you do is you use opportunities, or maybe he's even a part of it. I don't know. He could be a part of the big system. He certainly takes money. So you take someone like Trump comes on the scene who says, we're going to build a wall on the southern border, and you use that to tell Mexicans and people of Spanish descent that all white people hate them because you want to break them further into camps. Now, anyone who doesn't listen to the institutional power, the caricature, knows that the reason so many people want a wall built on the southern border is because there's this giant welfare state, and the more people that come in, well, the more money has to be taken from taxes to pay for those people that just came into the country. You see? So the more, so people push back against that. And then also the other side of the coin, well, let me word this right. Sometimes you just have to slow down when you're talking, right? So you have these people coming in from Mexico, from South America, and when they get to the United States of America, they go right onto the welfare system. And because they go onto the welfare system, that means middle-class citizens who are majority white are being taxed even more. And they're being taxed at higher rates. So those people push against it because they say, no, this is being used to take away my money. This is being used, I'm being robbed at gunpoint by the very government, the institutional power, pushing this agenda on me. Then, of course, with open borders, yes, you will have fine people across the border. My God, if I was in Mexico, I would try to cross the border. I don't fault these people. What do you mean, these people? Mexicans? I don't fault Mexicans for trying to cross the border. Why would I fault them? I would try to do it too. The problem is you don't just get good people. That's also a golden opportunity for all the drug cartels, in many cases funded by the American government, because this is all about divide and conquer, and the big corporations that control the government, but we won't go there quite today. I'm not going to talk about politics after this. I've been trying to get out of the political game, but I couldn't let someone go on my stream and disrespect me, endanger my child's future, and disrespect many of the people that are great people that have followed me for so long. So then it creates a golden opportunity for the drug cartels. So of course the drug cartels are going to not only flood the United States of America with more drugs. By the way, I think drugs should be legal. In fact, I think they're illegal because they serve as a revenue for the government, for the CIA. That's why drugs are illegal. But not only do the drugs cross over the border, but what you get is the cartels need their networks set up, right? You need to be able to push your drugs into the United States of America, and then you need to be able to control areas because you have competing drug cartels. So what happens is you get all of these drug cartel members who are the same way like a military would be deployed overseas. These drug cartel members are deployed into Los Angeles. They're deployed in Enrique, you go to Chicago. Lewis, you go to New York. And these drug cartel members and their soldiers These are soldiers, are sent into cities all over the United States of America. So you get these Trump supporters saying, who understand this, saying no. Oh, and yes, there is actually a demographic side of it because, well, it wouldn't be a demographic side, but basically, people that come from South America tend to vote for bigger government, tend to vote for the welfare state, and tend to vote for open borders. So you're also letting more people in who are voting to give the government the right to essentially use a gun to rob you even further of not only your money but your rights. So there's these Trump supporters who are aware of this, who understand this, and they say, okay, yeah, we need to build a wall, we need to stop immigration from the third world. But then the media comes on and says, no, this is about historical white oppression. This is because all white people are racist. And then Marla goes on to my stream and says, white people, white people, white people, white people, white people. You're the racist here, Marla. White people aren't the racist. There are racist white people. But you see the distinction between white people aren't the racist, there are racist white people. Black people aren't racist, there are racist black people. That's the distinction you're not making, Marla. You're just saying all these Trump supporters are racist. You're the racist. And it's ironic that you don't see that because it's so patently obvious if you start to understand the world. So you have the white men in one group, and you have the woman, the white woman, the minority woman in another group. Then you have the black people in another group, the gay people in another group, the transgenders in another group, the Hispanics in another group. And it becomes very easy for the people in a position of power to manipulate the public to get whatever agenda passed that the government wants passed. It's a divide and conquer strategy. This is how power operates. And by going around screaming about white people, you're actually playing into their hands. It's the same thing when people criticize Islamic terrorism. When you stand up and say you can't criticize Islamic terrorism because it's Islamophobic, you're actually hurting all of the majority, which are the peaceful Muslims. Because you're making it a binary, right? It's either, so it becomes Muslims good or Muslims bad. No, the majority of Muslims are fine people. That doesn't mean you can't criticize Islamic terrorism. Just as I said earlier, the same thing with binaries. So you say, you can't criticize Jewish influence in the media. You can't criticize Jewish influence in academia. You can't criticize Jewish influence in Hollywood, or that makes you an anti-Semite. No, it doesn't. But what you're doing is creating a binary where it's either Jewish people good or Jewish people bad, and you're using that to protect the bad people, which is the government and the corporations that control the government. But we'll get into that another time. Because pointing out the influence in the media, pointing out the influence in academia and Hollywood is not saying that all Jewish people are bad. In fact, most Jewish people are great people. I grew up in a very Jewish town. In fact, my grandmother came from Russia in 1899. She was a Russian Jew. And according to Jewish law, which goes by you are Jewish based on the mother, I am legally, according to Jewish law, Jewish. Now, I'm not, because I'm not a psychopath and I don't believe in, I don't believe bloodline makes you a religious belief. Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. And I pray to God every night, and I do weekly Bible studies. And my entire family is Christian. But it's this low consciousness thinking that I heard during my stream that I tried to be respectful, and we agreed to talk about homeschooling and unschooling, but I just couldn't allow. I held my tongue. But then I got off the stream, and it irked at me for about 2 hours, and I said, screw it, I'm going to address this. And I came on to this stream, and here I am addressing it, because I can't allow you to come onto my stream and talk about how bad white people are, because that type of rhetoric endangers my child. That's the type of rhetoric that leads to a situation happening in the United States of America like we see happening in South Africa, where white people are being murdered for the color of their skin. Do you see why I can't allow that to happen, Marla? And by the way, when you push that rhetoric and you think you're helping minorities, as I just described, you are hurting them. You are hurting them. You are hurting black. When you criticize white people like that, you are hurting black people. You are hurting Spanish people. You are hurting Muslims. So during your stream, you talked all about diversity and how you got to spend all the time with the Somalian immigrants in Cambodia. Well, maybe you should spend some time with some Trump supporters and stop talking about the institutional power media-created caricature, which you talked about on my stream. I didn't want to have to address this. I didn't want to have to address this. I didn't want to have to address this. My hand was forced. And it is what it is. It is what it is. So I invited you onto my stream, and you asked me if I wanted to read your book, and I read your book, and I took the time to do that. I invited you onto my stream, and we had a great conversation about homeschooling and unschooling, and I allowed you to plug your book in front of the people that follow me. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you didn't have a background on some of the things I've talked about in the past, or at least the caricature of what those things are. But you came on my stream and talked about how racist white people and Donald Trump supporters are, when ironically turned the Black Mirror around because you were the one being the racist. And wouldn't be very Christian to me to allow that type of racism on my stream. So anyway, guys, I just wanted to address that, and I didn't want to have to go this route, but I've been staying out of politics because I'm into the homeschooling thing now, and I'm doing great work. But I'm an actual historian. I know history, and I understand the levers of power better than 99% of the population. And although I'm sure you believe what you said, that white people are the cause of all problems in society, I hope this stream, if you were able to get through it, is enlightening to you. I hope you see that you're actually feeding into the system that puts minorities in a bad situation in the first place, and also puts white people in a bad situation. So put up the Black Mirror. Stop going around spewing your racism, which is a nonsense word, but I'll use your words, and that'll be a good life lesson for you. So anyway, guys, this has been I don't want to say it's been fun. It's something I had to do, but I couldn't allow. I didn't address what she said about good people on my stream, because I've been trying to stay out of politics, and we agreed to talk about homeschooling and unschooling and your book. But for you to come on my stream, and you know what? You knew because you went on a rant in the middle of the stream talking about how racist and horrible the founding fathers are. When I'm sure FFR News stands for Founding Fathers Resurrected, and you could see George Washington behind me. So there's that. I didn't plan on being up to 1:30 in the morning, but I just I couldn't let it go. Had to be addressed. Anyway, guys, appreciate you tuning in tonight. If you want to check out my Instagram page, I'd appreciate that. Go to Classical Learner Today on Instagram to learn all about homeschooling and alternative education options. And go to www.classicallearner.com to check out my website and learn everything you need to know about homeschooling, alternative education. We are going to change the world, and we need to educate our children better so that they don't believe historical lies and then use that to spew division rhetoric that could lead to our children being killed in the future. So, all right, thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in. This is, you know what? This time it wasn't Classical Learner. This was FFR News. So, I couldn't let that go. All right, guys. I got to take my dog for a walk, and I got to get to bed because I have to be up. Not going to get much sleep now. I'm sure my son will have me up at 5:30 in the morning, so I'm probably looking at 3.5 hours of sleep, but hey, guess I'll sleep when I'm dead. Bye, guys.